for making it okay for my dog and my toddler and my baby who may show up later. So special shout out. Rob, I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. Thank you so much for taking time.
Yeah, excited to be here with you.
Yeah,
and that was a great session. We just got done with. So
definitely.
Tough act to follow.
I know. We'll do our best. So we're going to talk about the state of streaming. We're going to talk about the state of digital video. I'll kick off with just a little bit of like setting the scene, and then can't wait to just get into it and talk. I think it's safe to say 2020 was a tipping point in terms of television consumption and TV advertising. Leading up to last year, you saw cord cutting kind of acting like inflation. It was pretty consistent, 3 to 4% a year. And then in 2020, that number skyrocketed almost 5x to 15%. And then what some people find surprising is that as you go into 2021, that number is set to potentially double. So 27% of people who still have cable are planning to cut this year. So you look at the realities of COVID in 2020 and people wanting to stay at home and wanting to binge content and have content on demand. You look at the additions of the economic pressures people felt, and they had the options of expensive cable subscriptions and increasingly great ad-supported and free content coming from the networks introducing streaming services like Peacock and HBO Max. And together, that confluence of events just accelerated so much of the trend that was happening. What probably would have happened over years happened in months. I think last thing I'll say on all of that before we get into what it means for Unilever and for the broader audience here, maybe what we think is one of the most under talked about parts of the whole thing was the impact that live sports has had on the acceleration of cord cutting and the acceleration of streaming. Our research suggested that something like 60% of people who still had cable still had it for live sports. And of course, that was just hugely interrupted last year. It's a bit of a Jenga block in terms of that tipping point where we saw, if you're looking at Nielsen's numbers or eMarketer's numbers, pretty much whoever you look at, the number of connected televisions in North America has tipped and is now greater than the number of cable subscriptions. So just some level setting to get into this conversation, why it's so important that we talk to a leader like Rob and a leading organization like Unilever about what's happening. So Rob, let me pitch it over to you and just ask you to share how those shifts in consumer behaviors created opportunities for Unilever and how you've had to respond to these accelerations.
So I think, Joe, that's great. I think, listen, there's a lot of insights and kind of data points you dropped there. And so let me first start with just some perspective on that, and then I'll shift to Unilever, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Because there was a lot there to unpack. I think first off, it's undeniable that COVID has been an unbelievable accelerator for so many things that were happening. And frankly, there were so many things that we just never saw coming. And the reality is, I think it will take years to sort out how these trends or movements come and go. I oftentimes get cautious of the siren that like immediately everyone follows a certain trend, and like you have to be cautious and evaluate every hot take from every cultural or global moment. I think back to almost 21 years ago, following, living in New York City after 9/11 and thinking about what we thought the world would be in the next couple of years. And I think the world was very different than what we anticipated with our kind of hot takes and perspective. Something on a lighter note, like if I would have my way, if I was a teenager, I would have thought I'd be wearing parachute pants for the rest of my life. Like things going calm, and we can't take every hot take and trend.
You mean you're not wearing parachute pants right now?
I'm not wearing Lululemons maybe, but like not parachute. Maybe
Okay.
That's the next version. But I think we just have to like be careful, like every transformative trend and like take from that. I finally heard a conversation a couple of days ago. I have two teenage boys, but like this idea that like, there's the assessment now from teenage boys is that like Facebook is like for my bubby and Bubby's like a Yiddish term for like grandmother, and like Instagram is for my mom. And I just think like, if you think back a couple of years ago, that just you would never have thought that anyone would see the lens through that. But like, that's the world we live. So again, I think that's a hot take that's not accurate either, but it just, again, we have to be cautious of like, so of course, massive change from COVID. And I think for the media industry, Unilever's thinking about these, for the media industry in general, I think there's some serious questions we have to ask ourselves. So one is, you brought up that point about sports, and I've been thinking a lot about this. So are sports ratings and sports engagement, are they really never going to come back? I mean, do we really believe that the experience, the communal experience of live viewing and fandom and watching in a bar and watching with family and friends, do we believe like that's not going to come back? I don't know. I'm just, before everyone jumps on this TV, sports are dead for a host of reasons, I just, I think to myself, I think, are we really never going to go back to movie theaters? Like, do we really feel like watching like these amazing movies in our homes or on our iPhones? Is it like, are we done with movie theaters? I don't know. Everyone's writing it off, but I don't know. It's funny. It wasn't that long ago, but if I think to like the Game of Thrones finale, like outside of sports, is that the last finale with a collective viewing experience in the world we're living?
I think so.
Are we gonna need a Truman Show essentially to like bring us all back to collective experience together? I don't know. And then I think about Netflix, like kind of working our way to like this topic is Netflix current business model, can that sustain both its current course of competing for eyeballs as well as investing for content with all the new players? Like, can that business model sustain itself the way it is with those two forces of like enormous competition for eyeballs and then enormous competition, by the way, for content? And, ultimately, I think, this almost the last question for me when I was thinking about this is that, ultimately, are we going to come to the conclusion that maybe there's a subscription fatigue and that $100 premium Wi-Fi and then all these bundles of subscriptions is actually that much better? Are we going to long for the bundle of some sort? And are we just like, those are my first perspectives of like everything kind of like you were saying, that I think is worth like pondering before we just race to like, to tackle these trends, which I think, of course, we're seeing acceleration, but I think we have to pick and choose.
I love it. I think, you're approaching it with a healthy dose of skepticism and nuance and appreciating that, it's not black and white and you can't know if the last year has taught us anything, it's that change is constant. And so, you could jump to any number of conclusions when in reality, I mean, I'll add a couple points to what you said. I think everyone is hungrier than they've ever been for live sports. I know I am, but I also think the networks have learned a lot about monetization. And I think streaming monetization of live sports, things like the Olympics, things like the playoffs, I mean, they were already coming onto programmatic in 2019, but watch what happens. I mean, that's going to be a really different sort of monetization strategy for those guys going forward that I think will take into account some of what we've learned and some of what we want in terms of flexibility and in targeting for advertising. And then I'll just add to your Netflix point, which I thought was great, that, compounding all of what you said is also the need for just global expansion into markets whose economic pressures actually make the US economic pressures look like nothing. And so, the need for lower cost or ad funded models to combat what you called out as subscription fatigue, which is already real, not to mention sort of streaming wars annoying people about like, how do I watch this? I can't get that on X device. I can't. That's that. I think I love how you're approaching the whole thing, but I know you were about to get into, what it means for you guys.
Yeah, no, so I think it's a great segue, I think, into like how we're approaching it. So listen, we've been experimenting with you can call it whatever you want, video neutral planning for years. I think we've been looking at over the last 6 or 7 years, and certainly with the rise of YouTube, early network streaming, even movie theaters and cinema. Like, how do we think about sight, sound, and motion? And it's been a very tough nut to crack. I think we applied a lot of science, a lot of data, but we have not gotten it right yet. and we just haven't. And the truth is, it just continues to evolve, and we're continuing to expand our engagement because, you know, it's YouTube obviously now, and, you know, with the early days of CW and then Hulu, and then now it's like we're doing Peacock, we're talking to HBO Max, Paramount Plus, Discovery, and there's just, how do you then start putting all these things into your model? And then you have, like, by the way, video without sound, and you have Facebook Watch, and so how do you begin to like put the art and science into these experiences? Because there's no question that connected TV or streaming, or again, however you want to classify it, there's a lot to be said and opportunity. So, you know, we had a handshake agreement for many years between the consumer and the media company. And part of that handshake agreement was some advertising and some sponsorship. And this was brought to you by, and I think over the last 20 years plus, we've broken that handshake agreement as an industry with the consumer. And it's just, there's just too much now, too much clutter, too many ads. And we've all, I think, been part of that process. I'm not going to just say it's the media companies. Obviously, advertisers in our pursuit of cost have, like, you know, they've expanded pods, and we've gone from 30-second ads to now 15-second ads and 6-second ads. So I feel like that is an opportunity for us to reset the balance here. And I feel like that's a huge opportunity, and to create I think a much better ad experience.
Yeah.
And so I think that's big for us. That's part of our process of thinking about this. The other is, the reality is, younger consumers are streaming. We're going after young consumers in addition to older consumers, where we used to be able to reach everybody in the television space. Now it's fragmented, and so streaming is important there. And, you know, so I think the opportunity to target with the power of what we've gotten accustomed to in digital in the television space, I think is very exciting.
Me too.
The reality is, we're not there yet. At least we're not there at scale. And that's kind of the business we're in. And so I think that if you think about like scale and targeting and the use of data, it's an unbelievable promise, but it has to also be priced right. I think we're very cognizant of like some of the first movers and the enormously high CPMs, and like that's not scalable proposition either for many advertisers to take advantage of, like television. So I feel like you need to find a balance, but overall very bullish and exciting about the future of connected TV and the enormous opportunities it presents for advertisers like us and the industry at large to re-engage, to like reconnect on that handshake with consumers and create a better experience.
Yeah, well, look, is it fair to say, Rob, like, you know, a lot of that broken, I love the way you talked about the handshake and the sort of broken agreement. A lot of that comes from pressures put on traditional advertising channels to just ram in more cheap reach, just kind of like you talked about. And anybody who watches linear these days knows 20 ads per pod. I mean, it's made a lot of experiences kind of unwatchable. And so, you know, is it fair to say that overexposure and trying to get more inexpensive reach through sort of waning traditional formats is a big part of that broken handshake, and that trying to get it right in digital as the eyeballs shift is a lot of the opportunity? Is that fair to say?
You know, I think it is. I think, I mean, in the end, consumers want a good experience. So for us, people oftentimes say, what do you look for in a streaming partner? And the first answer is a good consumer experience.
Yeah.
A good consumer experience that we could then be part of in an appropriate way, I think is really what we prioritize. And then certainly, I think the promise of connecting what we've seen in digital to streaming at scale is just an enormous opportunity for bettering the consumer experience, and thus making it better for advertisers.
And so, you know, that better consumer experience that we're shooting for in digital, that we're shooting for in streaming. I mean, I think about that and I think fewer, better, probably more expensive ads, right? But they perform better. And so part of that is, to your point a minute ago, you got to make the math work in that equation. That has to make sense for you for reach. It has to make sense to you for targeting. It has to make sense for you for efficiency. And so as you said, the targeting that's available in digital, the frequency capping capabilities that should be available there, those should be key inputs to making that math work. And they should be key inputs to a better consumer experience, because if you can spend the same amount or less and show fewer ads that hit the target better, and that achieve optimal frequency, right? That's how we start to make that math work, it seems to me.
Yeah, agree.
And what an awesome sort of transition into the upfronts as a topic.
They're upon us. They're upon us.
They are. I would love to dig into it with you. I mean, we see and hear you guys do audience first so much globally across all channels. Obviously, that bleeding into television creates a new paradigm. And then again, I'll just cite research and say, you know, we see 60% of marketers saying that they're planning to decrease upfront commitments in 2021, and that half of those are planning to shift more into programmatic video. You know, when asked why, they're saying they want to be more data driven with everything they do. They want to be able to measure performance better. They want flexibility to optimize mid-flight. They want optionality to be able to, you know, potentially react to the changing ecosystem. And even many of them are saying, you know, a third of them are saying they want to cancel without penalty, which can be hard. So I would love to just hear, you know, what you're willing to say and how you guys are coming into the upfronts this year.
Yeah, so I think so I actually always love the upfronts. I love the pomp and circumstance of it. I love the opportunity to kind of see the programming, kind of hear from the leaders of the media companies, how they're evolving their business. So, you know, obviously a little bit different this year, and who knows, again, if they'll go back to ever the way they were, because things simply aren't the same. But listen, I think, listen, people talk a lot about audience approach now, and listen, I can't speak for us, but Unilever's always been this audience approach, and even in the upfront, we bought audiences. We didn't buy necessarily specific programming. And I do think sometimes we lose sight of the media business, because it's always been, particularly actually even television, has been rooted and steeped in data and audience information. It just, we try to translate that into like what we've seen over the last decade. But it, you know, that was built on this foundation of, I think, really good thinking and working in the kind of traditional media space, both television, print. Of course, we're just taking it to a different level now, but I think it's worth like reflecting that it's not like TV was helter skelter. I mean, it was very much data driven.
Yep.
So we follow consumer eyeballs and frankly their ears. And so we did that with Facebook, Snapchat, we're doing with TikTok, you know, Reddit, whatever it is. You know, we're pushing for our brands to be at scale, but also in quality environments and surrounding good content that ultimately is relevant for the consumer. So in that context, you know, we look at the upfront, we think it's going to be a different type of upfront. We think all the big players now have streaming opportunities and services, and how does that all link together? We're living obviously in very volatile times. So although we're certainly now, we can go maskless outside if we are vaccinated, you know, there are parts of the world that are just facing their own kind of a COVID crisis now. And, you know, as a global company, we see that firsthand. What's going on in India and parts of Brazil is absolutely heartbreaking. And this is by no means over. Hopefully our vaccine will ensure us that we're protected from all these other variants. But I think we're living in certainly volatile times. And so the opportunity to have flexibility, both in the timing of our dollars, but also in how we think about the media partners and them holistically. So whether it be linear or to the streaming or to their social streaming, however it is, those are important parts that we're going to be looking for in the upfront. Ad innovations obviously is certainly something that we're very much interested, both to in this kind of like sight, sound, and motion TV space, to both create demand and then capture that demand, I think is important to us. And then last but not least is continuing to press the kind of traditional media players. By the way, I even hate the word traditional, because these guys are unbelievably innovative now, and traditional makes it like they're old.
That's fair.
I think they're reinventing themselves. And I think the measurement and the data is an area that they need to step up, I think, to match some of their more native digital players. But I think they're on their way. And you know, it's important for us as we think about the entire media mix to kind of work with them in the early days here. But I think we're coming to a place, and I'm sure you're going to ask me about measurement at some point, but that's a conversation for later. But I think that's an area also we're going to be pushing in the upfront.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the whole process, rewarding great content. We're in the I think we're in the golden age of content. I think we're still there. I think it's still growing and getting better. And I love the celebration of that as a concept. And I also, there's nothing more important to the trade desk than funding great content coming from everywhere. And I think it's an amazing opportunity for you guys to get behind that. I guess you said it really well about, when you come to these partners, you're asking them about the consumer experience of their content, of their service, of their platform. And you talked about sort of the handshake and the value exchange. What role do you see Unilever playing in improving and sustaining that consumer experience on those platforms? And like, what are the key levers that you think you can pull to make that a strong and better, handshake and relationship upon which so much of your growth, and global sort of output growth is based on from advertising, right?
Yeah. So I think, so just like the media companies didn't get into this situation on their own, I think they're not going to be able to fix it on their own either. Yeah. Right. And I think so us as advertisers, I think, have a responsibility, have an opportunity. And so, listen, brands are storytellers. We tell all kinds of stories. And I think for an organization like Unilever, who really has purpose at its heart, with our brands, have rich stories behind them. So we could tell all kinds of stories and diverse stories on a brand basis. So, and it gives us a lot of flexibility to tell different stories. So, Dove can go from telling a story about a brand and its 1/4 moisturizing lotion and the amazing functional value it gives to your face and your body. Or we can also talk about a Dove story about the Crown Act, which is our focus on ending hair discrimination. That really is synonymous with Dove because it's part of our purpose. And so I do think the streaming landscape provides a potential platform for us to tell these stories in a totally different way. And that's what really excites me about the streaming space. And I think the connected TV space more broadly. Listen, I wasn't born in the media industry. I was a brand marketer for most of my career, including my first half of my career at Unilever. And so, I remember thinking when I first came into media about a decade ago, I was like, this is amazing. The digital's exploding. This is the Mad Men era, without the drinking. And it's like every couple of years I wake up and I realize, again, this is like, as you said, a golden era, a golden opportunity. Like we are again in a Mad Men era, full of so many opportunities for exploration. And it's almost like going back to the early days of television where you talked about like how advertisers and the media industry with content like brought all this amazing content experience to consumers. And I think we are on the verge of that kind of opportunity again, and we can't blow it. And I think we're doing a host of things around ad experience and to kind of reshape and reframe how consumers engage with that. So whether it be kind of solo ads or ads like sponsor a show or binge ads, if like we can understand how they're using their devices. You can do curated binge ads if you want. But on command, we did some voice stuff with Peacock where it was like the simple, like you watch an ad, we said, if you want the product from Suave at Target, just say it. And boom, we did it. Subscribe and save on the ad, Amazon OTT platform. Integrations and custom content that frankly, we're not the premium, we're just not scalable for us. Now we can do it on a different level in the space. So actually, I think there's a couple of examples that I asked the brand innovation guys to show, just to give people a flavor and sense. So I'm not sure if we can roll some of those. I think the first one is something we did with Peacock and Axe when they brought The Office back. We looked for kind of a fun way to be part of that Office's returning experience where we could like integrate the brand in an interesting way. So can we roll that, or do I have to like?
The hardest part about working from home is making it feel like an actual work day. So every morning I shower, give myself a little spray to smell ready for the day, and then I put on my work clothes, I eat breakfast, and then I head into the office.
Hey, Emma, can you get Roger from finance on the phone, please?
What? I'm in the middle of calculus. Leave me alone, loser.
I'm gonna have to let her go.
At least we have The Office.
So again, acute spot, very much in sensibilities, and I think they did a great job, as did we, again, across our social networks, to bring that kind of partnership of Office coming back with acts kind of, integrated in an appropriate way that's not too much, but just kind of just right.
Amazing.
So that's a fun example. Again, these things are like, to do this at the scale of like the traditional old world of linear just was like impossible.
Yep.
Now in this world, I think we have opportunity. So the next one actually is Punky Brewster. So I'm a little bit older than you, but I remember her as like a childhood actor, and now she's back. And so this was another example we did with Peacock for Briars. But like, again, it's an example of how you can go behind the scenes and do things that are just very different with content development, storytelling.
Soleil, we're ready for you.
One sec. I just need one last touch up. You can't rush Punky Power.
Watch the new Punky Brewster, now on Peacock, thanks to Briars.
So another cute way to kind of storytell. We work together to promote the platform, promote the show. And I think, again, I'm going back to the golden era of television and the opportunity to reinvent it with these kind of opportunities. I think it's a lot of, we are blessed. We work in an unbelievable industry to change trends, change minds. And by the way, it's a lot of fun. And so I think these are some examples. I think there's like some other images just to give people a flavor of some of the things we're doing. Are there any more examples to like share? I sent a bunch, I know. It just so I think here, if I look at these are like pause ads for a degree. This is a great example from on Amazon's OTT about subscribe and save for Tresemme. Trying to move, I'm moving your face here, Jed, hold on. So this is like kind of an ad on Hulu where it's like, hey, watch this content, and like the rest of the show is free. Again, just different ways to add value to the experience that I think you just obviously can't do in television. As it is today. I think television will be changing as well, but I think, I think streaming offers like this amazing portfolio of opportunities for advertising and again, enhancing the consumer experience. So again, I go back to like, media companies didn't get us into this, and they're not going to get us out of this. I think we have a role as advertisers to bring creative thinking to the party. And that's what we've been loved to do with our partners. We've done a ton of stuff with Peacock, obviously, those examples, but if I date back to Hulu and Amazon and others, that we're excited on the way.
That's awesome. I think it's a fantastic sort of use case to bring creative storytelling to match the formats and the platforms and use technology to meet the moment, in all honesty. And it's such a great angle on the question of how can Unilever support a better handshake and a better deal with the consumer. At the end of the day, we started by saying fewer, better ads, right? And in my mind, those were really good. And in that world, hopefully, we don't have to continue with the oversaturation. Hopefully, we don't have to continue with trying to meet KPIs at the expense of consumer experience and also brand affinity in many of those cases. But those were amazing examples, I think, of not doing that and of really investing in the golden moment and taking advantage of the new capabilities in this moment. You did spend a while on, like the reality of today and the importance of working with the networks, who I totally agree are in most cases really meeting the moment and becoming, innovative and offering these new streaming platforms and opportunities. So in this new world, you've got both. You've got at this moment really big investments within linear and within cable, and you also have investments within the streaming and the connected platforms. Somebody I know asked a question about podcasting. So streaming's of course bigger than just television. Can you talk a little bit about how you're balancing that and strategizing having both in market?
So I think, let me actually frame this, because I think it's a specific kind of like television streaming question. But if I take a step back and just think about this more broadly, which is at Unilever, and we think about our investment, we start with a series of simple questions. Are the plans that we're developing and the ads that we're buying, are they being seen by humans on the target of interest in safe and suitable environments and measurable? And not measurable by the people who sold us them, but by independent third parties. And I think that kind of sets the framework for how we think our media investment across every channel. And so I think that's the kind of philosophy and approach we're bringing to the television and streaming space, but frankly, the media ecosystem more broadly. We've been pushing that for some time.
Yep.
But I think that, that's where we start. So so we're looking for, again, to lean into this kind of media kind of neutral strategy around which is even beyond kind of like the video neutral. Like we want to, we want to be where the consumers are, and they're engaging in environments with ad experiences that both, again, create that demand and capture ultimately. I think, oftentimes we look at digital as it's like this capture demand, and television was a create demand. And so how do we kind of bring those together? Because in many cases, people are not necessarily ready just to buy right there. And so time and time again, we see that if we get too focused on like the click to buy or that performance component, that we lose sight of like building a brand and our storytelling, and it becomes about a price point or a coupon. And that's not a way to build a sustainable brand. And obviously Unilever is built on brands that have been around for decades, if not 100 years. And so you don't get there by just doing that click to buy. I think it's really thinking through the entire journey. Listen, the consumer journey is extremely different. The traditional funnel is not what it used to be. Like we're living and driving that, but I think it's finding a balance between that, both create and then capturing the demand, and being able to have that capture in a lot more places than it is today. Yeah. And so I think as we kind of approach and reconcile, we're going to lean in with our kind of video neutral planning, but even just broader, our media neutral planning that really puts the consumer at the center experience.
Yeah. I think it's a great, you talking about video neutral and media neutral planning. From our years together, and from my exposure to the Unilever business, Unilever's led in terms of attempting to consolidate, centralize, break down silos, and bringing planning and buying and measurement together. So would you share a little bit about how that's helped you optimize, brand across regions and channels in the vast portfolio? It feels really tied to that neutrality that you just talked a little bit about.
Yeah. So one is, I think, the Trade Desk has been an amazing partner. I mean, I know we're just sitting the two of us, but it really is that's the truth. We have partnered with you over a period. I mean, that's the thing. I don't want to lose sight of, is that the importance of sitting down and sitting with your partners and nurturing those relationships. Because listen, I remember the Trade Desk started, we were working with somebody else, and it was like, and to some degree, you can't sign long-term deals. You got to place some bets, and you figure out who can I nurture, and if it's not working, you go to someone else. But you guys are someone that we started nurturing and working with, and I think you guys met the moments, the expression you use, and I think have done a terrific job, and I think have helped us in this journey. Because frankly, that's what it is. We're doing a ton of work in the space, but we are, we're just not even at midfield, I think. So we've been building capabilities internally with partners like yourself. I think we've also been externally focused, pushing, I think, the industry around measurement, and ultimately consumer privacy is where this starts. Again, it goes back to the consumer, and privacy is paramount. We do that, and we're obsessed with talking about that and working through that and making sure our partners are kind of living up to that promise. But that said, I think the industry measurement, the use of data it's a burning platform, because we must do better than this. And I think that we could do much better as an industry and meet the moment around privacy. And so there's a range of initiatives we're involved with at GARM and PRAM and I know working with you guys on some of the unified ID stuff that,
Yep.
that respect privacy, but frankly, make it a better consumer experience, because again, goes back to the consumer. Without this kind of holistic view, we're going to be like spamming them with ads, no frequency controls. I think we're going to be selling them products they're not interested in. It's like it takes away all this amazing tech and learning that we've had. And of course, of course, privacy is part of the story, but there's ways I think we can work together better as an industry to take advantage of, I think, what's in front of us and kind of, as you said, meet this moment.
Yeah, I'll rewind and go back in time, because I was lucky to be a part of when we started working together years ago. I think it was like 2013, 2014. And Unilever's recognition of, it was so much of what you have talked about over the years of supply chain transparency, real transparency, third-party measurement, those concepts. I just want to validate for everyone, that's not just what you talk about, that's what you cared about then. That's what has happened every step along the way since then. So we also really appreciate that force that you've created and that drumbeat that you've never let go of in the industry. And together, I feel like that's shaped so much of what we've done and what's been so important to us as a company. So I really want to thank you for that, and to your approach to partnership also. I love that you brought up Unified ID 2.0. We really appreciate, of course, the support of Unilever in an initiative that's aimed at improving the open internet, right? And really improving the consumer experience of the open internet, because when you think about fragmentation and complexity, it's relatively simple in one giant website, and it's complex, but probably more important in the long run for the open ecosystem to centralize around something. So I wanted to just open that topic with you, and hear what you'd be okay with sharing about Unilever's approach to the future of identity. How you guys are preparing for cookieless future as a concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think at two fronts. One is, as I started alluding to, like building our own internal tech capability, which, by the way, we've been doing for some time. But I think certainly recent decisions by some companies, I think, certainly accelerate the focus.
Yep.
So with that is, how are we building in a privacy manner a solid first-party data capability. And the second, I think, taking an active role in industry efforts. I think we're not going to get there as Unilever. We're just not. In fact, it reminds me of a story. Many years ago, we have a digital advisory board of like digital leaders from across the globe. It's a global advisory board, and I was speaking at it, highlighting the competitive advantage that we've gained from using viewability and fraud, like fighting bot measures and like third parties to help us optimize our media buys. I remember like explaining to the digital advisory board how we're doing this and the competitive advantage we have from it. And they asked me one simple question, is like, I get that that's great for you, but like, how does that make the industry better? How are you actually addressing the core issue? You're working around it now, but like, yeah, maybe there's all these people who aren't, but like, as long as there's all these people who are still buying things that aren't seen and bots, like that business will continue to thrive. And you're not, you need to lift all boats. And I think I walked away from that meeting like I'd been missing the point to some degree. I was so focused on like Unilever's experience and like competing in this like Wild West, or like I like to joke that for Game of Thrones fans, that the media team, we are the Night's Watch. We sit on that wall protecting our brands and from like the crazy ecosystem of the media environment that's out there, the White Walkers, and so I realized that actually we need to bring others on that wall with us. Yep. And I think that was like a totally redefining, like Keith Weed, who's our former CMO, Luis Tacoma, who runs media globally. We're all there. We all walked away and said, we need to be much more proactive here. And that's when Keith went on this whole blitz at Cannes a couple of times, talking about the industry efforts we need to undertake to really evolve the space. So I think there's things that Unilever's doing, pushing with our dollars, pushing internally. But I think most importantly, we're going to get there through a coalition of the willing and working through a number of industry initiatives.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly, when you think about bringing the entire ecosystem together to meet the moment, as we said earlier, of this hugely fragmented, hugely data rich opportunity, which also, presents tons of potential pitfalls and ways to disrespect the consumer experience. There's just never been a more important time to think like that as an industry and as a partner. And when we look at our support of the industry initiative around Unified ID 2.0, part of why that's so important is being an email-based solution. It's applicable to streaming. It's applicable to all of the channels that we just talked about: podcasting, audio. This is the principal way that musicians, journalism, content producers are making money in this new reality is through ad-funded formats, and they need the ability to do targeted advertising, to do frequency capping, to do better measurement, all of the things you talked about to improve the consumer experience. So you need an identity solution that meets that moment and can do all of that, and can represent a clean supply chain. I would go as far as to say, never worked with anyone who's been as focused on a clean supply chain as our partnership with you guys. And I think understanding an identity solution that underpins streaming presents the opportunity to understand that supply chain in these new formats in a way that got a little messy in digital for a long time. And there were a lot of potential bad actors, introducing fees and funds. And so I think, that coalition thinking can really apply to these new channels in digital.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, a former colleague of mine, Babs Rangai, used to say that, we're the good guys. We're the good guys. Advertise the good guys. So I do believe we are the good guys and can be a force for good. So.
Me too. Well, Rob, let me get to a couple of the questions that have come in. There's a question about how flexibility and fluidity impact the deals that you do with media conglomerates. So I'm sure some of that is privileged information, but curious if that has the increased importance for you guys that it has as a it's a big buzzword, I think. It
is, but it's real. I think we saw this last year how real that really was.
Yep.
And you see, like we are this connected global world. Without sounding like corny, we are. So when a boat gets stuck in the Suez Canal, and the impact that has on prices and for everybody. And so I think that there are all kinds of global issues in this kind of volatile time that require us to have a need for flexibility. I think it was unlike others. And so you have to, and excuse me, they're doing some lawn work, my neighbor outside here.
I can't hear it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you can hear the person parked outside blasting
yeah.
music, but that's my version of that. So,
I think it's going to be a critical part of our strategy and our conversations with the big media conglomerates. Again, not just like, hey, we need money back, but hey, like you have a hit on streaming that's not there, or something's happening on linear, or let's remonetize and think together. Like that Axe example. Like, so it wasn't just like we just did the content, put it on Peacock. They put it like in their curating content trends, and we both leveraged our social platforms. And so I think there's a lot of power to do things and take advantage of all the work they're doing beside just the 15 and 30-second spot. And we're really gonna be pushing them to do so. And by the way, you referenced before about streaming. Like, so streaming is a whole other space that a lot of these media companies are getting into. And so I think we need to be ready and flexible to deploy dollars, again, wherever the eyes and ears are of consumers.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another question that came in was for you. What was the biggest learning or surprise in the past year?
I think the biggest learning or surprise is how our team and organization rallied. And when I say our team and organization, I don't just mean Unilever. I think we did an amazing job from supply chain to our sales to our marketing, but all the partners that we work with, from PR agencies to ad agencies to our media partner, media agency to, frankly, our media partners, and how flexible I think we're able to rally around the moment, both in operating our business, but also stepping up in a time of need. Businesses can't sit on the sidelines anymore on issues. And so, certainly Unilever's been at the front end of this. But, we need to step in. And I think, we launched a program in March and May of March through the end of last year called United for America, around kind of Unilever giving back and engaging. And you guys actually were a partner. And we had our first last year was a day of service where our employees broadly virtually volunteered, and our factories, what we did was that day was our factories, everything produced that day, the equivalent of our 11 or 12 factories, that day of production, we donated to Feeding America directly for other organizations. And actually, we're now a couple of weeks away from our second annual day of service. Well, on May 14th, we're going to be doing the same thing where all of our employees, our factories, our corporate business partners are going to be kind of rallying around the moment. So I think, to me, was like the biggest surprise, and in a very tough environment and context we're living, that I felt really good about how we as an organization at Unilever, our partners, and then the broader ecosystem of people we work with, agency partners, media companies, rallied around the moment.
Yeah. You said earlier, we're so fortunate to have the opportunity and to work in the industry we do. It's fun, and we have the opportunity to make a real impact and difference and shape some very important forces for the future.
Yeah.
I remember that day last year. I remember the team getting together and doing that work as partners. And it was a lot of fun. And it also presents the opportunity to feel like we're collectively making an impact on something bigger.
And actually, by the way, even now, I think, as I think about like a couple of weeks away, the ability to get outside and, so we're working with the Boys and Girls Clubs, Feeding America. Again, we're part of the Ad Council's vaccine education. So we're going to be out we're out working with them to let's get people vaccinated. Let me start this. It's crazy, it's been politicized, but let's get people let's answer the questions they have. Let's educate people on vaccines. Let's get them comfortable with what the science is. And so people can feel comfortable getting vaccinated. And then let's get back to being together. I mean, I hugged a person for the first time a couple of weeks ago outside of my bubble family. And it's just it's crazy. We are meant to be social beings. And certainly everyone loves a little working from home. And, some people who are introverts, which I'm not, have certainly enjoyed the experience. But I think even the introverts I know, they want some more human connection. So I feel like
there is a spectrum where the introverts started going crazy too. Yeah. That's what I noticed. I saw when I saw the introverts say, "Oh, I really need to hang out with you or talk to you." I was like, "Oh, this must be bad. We must really be." I love that, and I agree. I think we're entering a phase of at least in our East Coast world, some sunshine and some outdoor, which is making a big difference, and it feels really good. And I also really appreciated you're talking about information, because after all, we are talking about entertainment a lot today. Talked a lot about fun and entertainment, which is important for everyone. But at the end of the day, media, ad-funded media, is largely the most important global source of information, such as the vaccines that you're talking about as well. So this is bigger than entertainment. It's how we talk as a global community. So Rob, let me just say thank you so much. That conversation was so fun and so enriching. And I really appreciate your approach and Unilever's approach to meeting the moment, like we talked about.
Thank you.
So Alan,
thanks for the partnership.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you guys both very much. Rob, you had me at Facebook is for boobies. That was great. And also, I will, if it makes you feel better, I was doing one of these last fall, and the leaf guys showed up, and I was just riding the mute button the entire time. I talk and hit the mute button because they were right outside the window and could not get their attention. I can't hear. If you hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have heard it. Jed wasn't just trying to make you feel nice, feel good. It was an interesting thing that you were talking about, Jed. You had sort of paraphrased it. We call it the holy grail of this sort of shift to streaming. It's actually overall, it's just interesting to hear you guys talk about this thing, streaming, and the shift to streaming that we live and breathe, and sort of the brand perspective. But we call it the holy grail, which is fewer, better targeted ads that consumers don't mind seeing and brands will pay more money for. Now, of course, the problem right now is that brands will pay more money. The more money part, brands have one idea, programmers have another, and a lot of that is just sort of due to metrics and other things, but at some point they'll get there. But right now that seems to be the bump point. What, you know, how much is a CPM worth on streaming? Everybody's got their own idea, but it is really great to hear you guys. Thank you very much. And be talking to you soon. So
take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Now,
we'll look forward to the rest of the sessions.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And for those of you out there in TV land, I want to give you a quick reminder that you can ask questions to the speakers. They'll leave time at the end of every session to answer them. So type away your questions there, and you too may have a 15 seconds of fame. But right now, I'm going to welcome our next session of the day, and we have Jill Toscano, who is the Vice President and Head of Media at Walmart, which is a big win for this conference to have somebody like that on. And the session is going to be moderated by Laura Hendricks, who's the General Manager of Client Development at the Trade Desk. So welcome to the stage, Jill and Laura. And I'm going to fade out back into the background there and let you guys